Good morning, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. This is Rich again, back for your first video blog of the day for Friday, September 19th, 2014, around 7:30 in the morning in Billerica, Massachusetts. Nice and sunny day. It's going to be very, very chilly today. Highs close to 60. It's going to feel like mid-fall, and it's actually 3 more days to fall, but this weekend we're going to get a warm up. Maybe we'll reach 80 on Sunday. Some news to report. The Pittsburgh Pirates beat the Boston Red Sox by a score of 3-2 last night. Another heartbreaking loss by the Red Sox. They got swept by the Pirates. That's how the Red Sox season has been up to this point, and it's only one more week left until the 2014 nightmare season's over. And that's about it on the news. My first subject of the day is the top 10 greatest Intercontinental Champions of all time for the WWE. The WWE Intercontinental Championship was formed in 1979 in a fictitious tournament in Rio de Janeiro as Pat Patterson beat Antonio Inoki to win the first ever WWE IC Championship, and some of the greatest wrestlers have held the IC title over its 35-year history. And here's the 10 best wrestlers who've ever held the IC Championship, in my opinion. The greatest ones. Number 10 on the all-time list of the greatest Intercontinental Champions of all time, Macho Man Randy Savage. He held the title for over a year. He won it at the Boston Garden over Tito Santana on February 8th, 1986. He held it into WrestleMania 3 when he lost it to Ricky the Dragon Steamboat on March 29th, 1986. He was a great champion. He had feuds with Tito Santana, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and others. And that IC title reign launched the Macho Man to have 2 WWE World title reigns in 1988 and 1992. Macho Man comes in at number 10. Number 9 on the all-time list of the greatest IC champions of all time, Pedro Morales. He was 2-time WWE IC champion, one from December 1980 through June of 1981, and again from November of 1981 through January 1983. He had some feuds with Ken Patera and Don Muraco over the IC championship. He held the title, both of his combined weights, over 600 days. Amazing. And number 8 on the all-time list of greatest WWE IC champions of all time, the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels. He held the title 3 times in the early to mid-90s, and he had some feud over the IC title with his former tag team partner from the Rockers, Marty Jannetty, Mr. Perfect, Razor Ramon, and Jeff Jarrett. He was a very great IC championship. He had some legendary matches with Razor Ramon at WrestleMania 10 and at SummerSlam 1995 over the IC championship. He comes in at number 8. Number 7 on the all-time list of the greatest Intercontinental Champions of all time, Chris Jericho. Chris has held the title 9 times, which is a record, and he probably was maybe the best IC championship in the modern era. And his famous quote, "It will never, ever happen again." And he says, "Welcome to Raw is Jericho." He comes in at number 7. Number 6 on the all-time list of the greatest Intercontinental Champions of all time, Double J Jeff Jarrett, 6-time WWE IC Championship. He had some great feuds over the IC title with Razor Ramon and others. And his famous thing in the WWE, that's JEFF. That's JEFF. JARRE. Double T, Double J, Jeff Jarrett. I liked his country music gimmick in the WWE, especially that gold tooth. Comes in at number 6. Number 5 on the all-time list of the greatest WWE IC champions of all time, Tito Santana. Tito Santana had 2 reigns with the IC championship. One in 1984, he won it at the Boston Garden over the Magnificent Muraco. Then he lost it to Greg the Hammer Valentine later on in September of 1984. Then he had a long-running feud with the Hammer, and it culminated with Tito winning the IC Championship in Baltimore in a steel cage in July 1985, and then he had the second win that lasted till he lost it to the Macho Man at the Boston Garden in 1986. Very popular when he was IC Championship. He was one of the few wrestlers who never to turn heel. I couldn't imagine Tito Santana as heel, but Tito should have had maybe a reign as the WWE champion towards the end of his career. But like the IC Championship fit his style. He came in at number 5. Number 4 on the all-time list of greatest Intercontinental Champions of all time, the magnificent Don Muraco. Don Muraco had 2 reigns of the WWE IC Championship back in the early 1980s. He put the WWE IC Championship into contention back in the early 80s. He had feuds with Pedro Morales, Rocky Johnson, and Superfly Jimmy Snuka over the IC Championship, and he's a WWE Hall of Famer, and he's the first wrestler to use the name The Rock. Don is in at number 4. Number 3 on the all-time list of the greatest Intercontinental Champions of all time, Mr. Perfect. Mr. Perfect had 2 reigns as the IC Championship, one from April of 1990 through August of 1990 when he lost it to the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich, but he regained it in November of that year, and then he had a long reign that lasted until August of 1991 when he lost it at SummerSlam 91 to Bret the Hitman Hart. Mr. Perfect was wrestling with a bad back, but as like his reign IC champion, it was amazing. 2 reigns. He should have He should have held the belt for a long time. He made it from April 1990 through August of 1991. That would have been the longest Intercontinental reign of all time if that happened. But but it never was to be. But like Perfect was probably one of the best Intercontinental champions. He had Bobby the Brain Heenan as his manager for most of his reign. And Mr. Perfect's in at number 3. Number 2 on the all-time list of the greatest Intercontinental champions of all time, Razor Ramon, the bad guy. Razor Ramon had 4 reigns of the Intercontinental title, and this catapulted Razor Ramon to be one of the best wrestlers in the mid-1990s. He had feuds with Diesel, Jeff Jarrett, and Shawn Michaels over the IC Championship. He had that famous ladder match at WrestleMania 10, which was, in my opinion, the best WrestleMania match of all time. And he was probably the bad guy who was the best as Intercontinental Champion in the 90s, in my opinion. And the number 1 best Intercontinental Champion of all time, he's the greatest Intercontinental Heavy Champion, the Honky Tonk Man. The Honky Tonk Man held the title from June 2nd, 1987 through August 29th, 1988, the first SummerSlam. He had a reign of 454 days, which is a record that's never been broken yet, and he was the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time. A lot of people said he was a chicken Intercontinental Champion, but he was a fighting champion. He held on to the title as long as anybody. Was managed by the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, and he had feuds with Jake the Snake Roberts, Macho Man Randy Savage, and Bruce Barber Beefcake while he was IC champion. It's too bad he didn't regain the IC champion after that, and his WWE career went down the chute when he lost the Intercontinental Championship, which was very sad because in my opinion, Honky Tonk Man could have made maybe one of those transitional WWE heel champions. But, you know, he's still the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time, and the Honky Tonk Man Hall of Famer 2015, it's a possibility. Well, that's about it for that. I'll be back later for 2 more video blogs. It's going to be about the Overman TV show that's on ESPN2, and the last one will be about Larry Bird. Have a good day, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. Bye now.